Hi everybody, just before we get into the video today, I do want to say that this is a reissued video. Now normally when we take down a video, for whatever reason, we don't usually reissue it. We don't like to clutter people's feeds, but people were literally emailing me about this one saying, Simon, where is the Nicolas Cage video? So yeah, we wanted to make a few tweaks and then reissue it. So here it is. If you've seen it already and you didn't want to see it again, I'm sorry for clogging up your feed. I'm sure there'll be a regular video, new video, along later today. Just before we get started with today's video, I want to thank Brilliant for sponsoring it. To support Today I Found Out and learn more about Brilliant, go to brilliant.org/todayifoundout and sign up for free. At one point in time, Nicolas Coppola, better known as Nicolas Cage, he changed his last name so as not to seem to be trying to cash in on his uncle, Francis Ford Coppola's name, was among the highest paid actors in the world. At the apex of his success, he was making some $40 million per year. In 2009, Cage's financial situation changed abruptly and he found himself in some rather dire financial straits. So what exactly happened? Well, the documented story of Cage's financial turmoil began in 2001 when he hired one Samuel J. Levin to serve as his financial advisor. Cage would later blame Levin for sending him down a path toward financial ruin, a claim Levin vehemently denies, insisting that Cage did it to himself and that the actor was already in severe financial straits when Levin was hired. In fact, according to Levin, when Cage hired him in 2001, Cage already owed significant money to the IRS and had squandered most of his fortune up to that point on the usual trappings of the ultra-wealthy, like cars, jewelry, and artwork. Now, if Cage had just spent his money on cars and fancy houses, there wouldn't be much of a story here, since plenty of wealthy people have lost everything buying stuff like that. I mean, humans are going to human. But Cage's path to financial troubles took a decidedly more eccentric route, more akin to legendary individuals such as Edward Hughes, the Golden Bull, and Evander Berry Wall, the king of the dudes. You see, in addition to relatively normal excesses like Rolls-Royces, a private jet, and a few yachts, Cage also bought some more, shall we say, unusual items. For starters, in a spending spree that would actually ultimately be somewhat profitable, Cage spent an obscene amount of money on comic books and comic book memorabilia. A lifelong fan of the medium, Cage at one point had a collection of comics worth several $1 million, including, most notably, a near-mint copy of Action Comics #1. This was a possession Cage was apparently extremely fond of, owing to being a huge Superman fan, further evidenced by the fact that he named his son Kal-El. Yes, really. Unfortunately for Cage, in 2000 his LA mansion was robbed. This comic and a few other valuable ones were stolen. After this robbery, Cage spent years looking for the comic, only for it to be recovered by the police thanks to one of the auctioneers on the reality TV show Storage Wars, because apparently nothing about Nicolas Cage's life could be dull. Upon hearing the news that the comic had been found, Cage issued a statement that read in part, "It is divine providence that the comic was found, and I am hopeful that the heirloom will be returned to my family." Now, there was a bit of doubt about this happening because an insurance company had paid out on the stolen comic when it was stolen, so Cage also had to work out a deal to return said funds in order to get the company to give the comic book back. Okay, so the comic was given back to Cage, but in order to pay off the debt, in order to get it back, he immediately sold the heirloom in an auction for a whopping $2,161,000, a record-breaking amount for a comic at the time, and about 10 times what he originally paid for it. Oh, by the way here, more recently in 2014, a copy of Action Comics #1 reset that record for $3,207,852. Not content with only one of the most valuable comic books in the world, he also bought a veritable zoo of animals. His pets included a shark, a crocodile, and a number of purebred dogs that were waited on paw and foot by hired handlers. Cage also owned a pet octopus that he apparently bought for $150,000 and a pair of albino cobras called Moby and Sheba, worth a cool $250,000. According to Cage, he studied the octopus's movements to improve his own acting, a claim that most speculate was just Cage saying that in an attempt to write off the octopus and its associated expenses on his taxes. As for his Petco, this is crazy. Nicolas Cage is up. As for his pet cobras Moby and Sheba, Cage claimed to need them for protection, again, perhaps so that he could attempt to write off these purchases for tax reasons. In an apparent bid to be a baller even in the afterlife, Cage also bought himself a massive 9-foot-tall pyramid-shaped tombstone. By far Cage's costliest purchases, though, they were the numerous properties that he bought and then spent millions of dollars remodeling and having giant parties in. These included a dozen estates variously described as being palatial in nature, including 2 actual castles in Europe, as well as 2 private islands in the Bahamas and the famed LaLaurie Mansion in New Orleans. You can see our upcoming video on our sister channel, Highlight History, the twisted tale of Delphine LaLaurie and a House of Horrors, for more about that. To be fair, on these ones, along with his many car purchases, including over 50 rare cars, such as a Lamborghini once owned by the Shah of Iran and a 1955 Jaguar D-Type he inexplicably decided to keep in his billiards room, despite guests claiming that it was a complete mystery how he got it in there, Cage did have some success in the early going buying these, enjoying them for a time, and then reselling them for a significant profit. The profits stopped, however, when his acting career turned obscenely lucrative, and then he mostly ceased doing the critical reselling part, as well as started bidding for many such items at well over their projected market value just to ensure that he got his hands on them. Along with fancy furniture and creature comforts like giant toy robots, oh yes, Cage bought countless impossibly large, awesome knickknacks for his many homes, including dozens of skulls belonging to long-dead prehistoric creatures, as well as things like shrunken pygmy heads. For a short period, the crowning jewel in Cage's skull collection was a $300,000 T-Rex skull he supposedly outbid Leonardo DiCaprio for. It would later emerge, though, that the skull had been stolen, prompting Cage to hand it over to the authorities to be given back to its original owner. Cage also owned a prehistoric bear skull that he accidentally destroyed while playing pool with Sean Bean. According to Bean, a distraught Cage took pieces of the skull and buried them in a nearby field the next morning. So when he wasn't walking around his house enjoying his collection of comic books and dinosaur skulls, Cage would throw massive Gatsby-scale parties at his various residences for his friends in Hollywood. Hugh Hefner would call Cage's parties the stuff of legends, and remember that Hefner was a man who woke up every morning for 5 straight decades in a massive mansion full of scantily clad models. At his parties, Cage would regularly give expensive party favors to his guests, and he particularly enjoyed making the affairs as lavish as possible. For example, in one noteworthy Christmas party, he reportedly paid professional lighting engineers to ensure the party was optimally lit, including seeing to it that his cars would be lit in the best way to showcase them. He also had tables carved out of solid blocks of ice and then covered them with a variety of seafood and various chilled items, while a production crew made sure that it continually snowed throughout the Los Angeles-based party. Although most of these parties invariably took place in Cage's expansive Bel Air mansion, the actor would frequently take his friends to his other residences at his own expense in his private jet. He didn't go broke all on excess, however. A lesser-known thing Cage spent vast sums of money on during this period was donating money to charities as freely as he spent it. As a result, Cage has been ranked by Forbes as one of the most generous actors in the world. Now, he didn't just promote these charities like many celebrities do instead of giving money, which, to be fair, is still a very good thing, but Cage quietly donated millions of dollars to dozens of charities over the years. For instance, in 2005, he gave $1 million to the Red Cross, and in 2006, he gave $2 million to Amnesty International. Now, all good things must come to an end, and in 2009, a year in which Forbes claimed Cage earned $40 million, Cage found himself with a major cash crunch, with the IRS slapping him with a $6.2 million unpaid tax bill. At the time, the stock market dip and the housing market crash saw his vast property and other investment holdings hit the tank. Soon enough, creditors came calling in droves. It didn't help that he had leveraged the former equity in many of the houses to then turn around and buy more estates in a massive debt-infused investment plan. Lacking liquid assets to pay his creditors, Cage saw many of his real estate investments he'd purchased when the market was near its peak sold off when it was at its low point, the old buy high, sell low investment strategy. As noted, Cage initially blamed his financial advisor for this sequence of events, accusing him of keeping him in the dark about the state of his finances, as well as skimming an excessive amount of money from Cage's accounts, a claim that Levin has denied, saying he was paid a standard fee for a business manager. Cage was so adamant about this that he even tried to sue Levin for several $1 million. Levin was furious about these accusations, filing a countersuit against the actor and releasing a statement saying that he did everything short of cutting up the actor's credit cards to stop him spending. Levin also claimed that he wrote Cage's agent begging him to somehow stop Cage from buying more property, as well as also advising the actor to keep his spending within $30 million per year if he wanted to break even. He also claims he told Cage that he really needed to pay his taxes promptly and for the correct amounts. No sh**. He also claims that he told Cage that he really had to pay his taxes promptly and for, the correct amounts. Now, some sources claim that Cage just ignored all this advice, although it does seem more likely that Cage was probably just being honest when he said that he just assumed this was being handled for him by those who managed his finances. Whatever the case, in his countersuit, a lawyer acting on Levin's behalf stated rather matter-of-factly, Cage knows that his losses are entirely and solely the result of his own compulsive, self-destructive spending, which he engaged in against Levin's advice. In the end, both Cage's suit and Levin's countersuit, they were dismissed by the courts in 2010. In an effort to settle his debts, Cage sold off virtually all of his assets, including most of his cars, his houses, and his dinosaur bones, and he reportedly began taking any movie role offered to him in order to earn some quick cash, explaining why he appeared in so many terrible movies in the early 2010s. Thanks to still being a top-billed actor, however, Cage has seemingly weathered the storm just fine today with an estimated net worth of around $25 million. This has allowed him to, in more recent times, start showing up at comic book conventions again, where he occasionally buys rare comic books, though seemingly exhibiting a little more restraint this time around. And look, I can't promise you that today's sponsor, Brilliant, they're going to give you the sort of maths education that will prevent you from throwing Gatsby-style parties that you can't afford, but what I can tell you is just don't throw any Gatsby-style parties with your car inside and you'll probably be fine. And once you've got that bit of maths mastered, you can move on to the more advanced things that Brilliant can teach you, like calculus and other math stuff, beyond basic arithmetic. Now, you've heard me talk about Brilliant before. They're a learning platform that focuses on active learning. This is where you're given a short bit of information on a scientific concept, and then you're asked to solve a problem based on that information. It's an incredibly effective way to learn. Right now, Brilliant have something that's relatively new, although I've been talking about it for a couple of months now. It's called Daily Problems, and it's 5 minutes a day that you can use to exercise your brain and learn something new. Thousands of people have learned how to use computer science to effectively bake cheese biscuits, calculate the area of a snowflake, learned how to finance Gatsby-style parties. Not really on the last one, that one I just made up. Nick Cage, come on, man. Each problem provides you the context and framework you need to tackle it. That means you can learn concepts by applying them. That's that active learning. This sort of short daily practice can lead you from curiosity to mastery in far less time than you would think. So go to brilliant.org/brainfood and finish your day a little smarter. The first 200 people to do so will get 20% off their annual subscription, and you can view all of the problems in the archives. So again, thank you, Brilliant, for sponsoring. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.